These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. Kurta, the palm-size mechanical calculator, was finalized by Austrian engineer Kurt Hertzstark while imprisoned in Buchenwald. Camp officials ordered him to perfect a gift for Hitler. He survived, and after liberation, the Kurta was produced in Liechtenstein and became a precision icon. Firefighting foam demonstration, Sundsvall, Sweden, 1953. A technician in protective gear stands inside controlled flames to prove the foam's smothering power. Spectators watch as the suit and coating prevent injury. April 18, 1942. A B-25. Mitchell lifts off USS Hornet for the Doolittle raid, the first U.S. airstrike on Japan. All 16 bombers launched early after detection and flew on to China. Most were lost, but the raid jolted Japanese command and electrified U.S. morale. 1977, Joyce McKinney, ex-Miss Wyoming, booked in the infamous Mormon missionary case. Investigators said she abducted 21-year-old Kirk Anderson, shackled him in a Devon cottage for 3 days, then skipped bail. Obsession turned into global headlines and an international hunt. July 28, 1945. A B-25 struck the Empire State Building at the 79th floor. Elevator operator Betty Lou Oliver survived the impact, then survived a 75-story elevator plunge when the cable snapped. A world record fall lived through. She recovered and later returned to ride the building's elevator again. September 1945, Hiroshima. A survivor artist stands in the ruins, sketching what the atomic blast left behind. With film scarce and memory fragile, the city was recorded by hand, evidence before it could vanish. June 13, 1931. President Paul Doumer relights the eternal flame at the tomb of the unknown soldier beneath the Arc de Triomphe, Paris. The new head of state had lost 4 sons in World War I, giving the ceremony stark weight. Ceará, Brazil, August 1983. A farmer holds a lizard he's about to eat to stave off hunger. A severe drought forced families in Brazil's northeast to forage reptiles and cactus to survive. Stark proof of famine's reach. Smolensk, 1941. 2 WWI-era British Mkv tanks, preserved as monuments beside the Assumption Cathedral, still loom over the square. Between them stands a German KFZ-2 staff car, today's occupiers framed by yesterday's armor. London, 1940. Madame Tussauds artists hand-paint wax heads, eyelashes, pores, glass eyes, while air raid sirens haunt the city. During the Blitz, many figures were moved or repaired as bombs threatened the museum. January 24, 1935. Richmond, Virginia. Kruger Cream Ale became the first beer sold in cans. A 2,000-can test showed drinkers accepted steel flat tops, opened with a church key. Canned beer soon overtook bottles and transformed the industry. 1915, HMS Queen Elizabeth. A sailor holds a plate from the first funnel, shredded by Ottoman shell fragments during the Dardanelles attack on 18th March. The hanging shovel symbolizes the Navy's shift from coal to oil. Queen Elizabeth was the world's first oil-fired battleship. Murmansk Oblast, 1942. Soviet Northern Fleet sailors guard blindfolded German Gebirgsjäger at the water's edge. Elite mountain troops reduced to prisoners on the Arctic front, bayonets fixed, eyes sealed to the route ahead. 1972, Daisy's Christmas ad marketed BB guns directly to kids, 7 to 17. Smiling families pose with air rifles by the tree, a snapshot of how youth marksmanship was mainstream in U.S. advertising. Berlin, June 1937. Hitler Youth Boys vault a solstice bonfire at a regimented night rally. Sport packaged as propaganda, drilling obedience on the eve of war. 1904. Ota Benga, a Mbuti man from the Congo, was taken to the U.S. and exhibited, first at the St. Louis World's Fair, later in the Bronx Zoo's Monkey House. Public outrage ended the display, but the damage lingered. He died in 1916. Moscow, Dorogomilovo, 1929. A bread line forms outside a bakery. Shoppers in felt boots clutch baskets for heavy 2-kilogram loaves, early Soviet shortages on full display. December 1916, a Bavarian aerial observer after a high-altitude reconnaissance flight, face marked by severe frostbite. At down 5,000 meters, unpressurized cockpits and thin gear left all exposed skin burned by cold. His injuries traced the edge of helmet and leather mask. April 18, 1945, Buchenwald. Liberated prisoners show U.S. soldiers the room where the SS used a wall-mounted hook and short noose to strangle inmates. The demonstration helped document execution methods for war crimes evidence. London, 1936. 2 women cruise a Wright-Craft scooter car, a road-legal microcar, beside a full-size saloon. This 249cc, 3-speed miniature was built for promotions, often styled as scaled copies of famous models. Chicago, 1897. Marshall Field's department store lines an alley with dozens of horse-drawn delivery wagons. Before trucks, big city retail ran on hay, stables, and precision logistics. R-101 wreckage at Alon, France, 5 Oct 1930, its maiden overseas flight. Then the world's largest airship, it broke apart and burned. Only 6 of 54 aboard survived. The crash ended Britain's imperial airship dream. Wessel, Germany, 1945. Allied bombing and shelling turned the Rhineside city into a cratered moonscape. The town was virtually leveled ahead of the Rhine crossing during Operation Plunder. Midway, June 4, 1942. The Japanese carrier Soryu carves a hard crescent wake while bombs splash ahead. Minutes later, U.S. dive bombers hit her, fires spread, and she was scuttled and sank. 1946. Oskar Schindler, second from right, stands with Jews he saved by shielding them on his factory lists. About 1,200 survived under his protection instead of deportation and death. They called themselves the Schindler Juden, living proof in a backyard snapshot. 1942. Seattle. Boeing Plant 2 was disguised as a sleepy suburb, fake streets, lawns, and plywood houses, so enemy reconnaissance would miss the bomber factory. Beneath the neighborhood, workers built B-17s out of sight. July 15, 1944, Klaus von Stauffenberg, far left, greets Hitler at the Wolf's Lair, 5 days before he hides a bomb under the briefing table. He aborted this first try. On July 20th, his briefcase exploded, the coup collapsed, and he was executed that night. WYU. A British ground crewman displays the bullet-resistant windscreen from a captured Messerschmitt Bf-109E. The thick, laminated block shows how German fighters armored pilots against head-on fire. November 10, 1962. A Soviet submarine steams off Cuba as Moscow removes its missiles under the U.S.-Soviet agreement, ending the Cuban Missile Crisis. U.S. Navy aircraft shadowed the withdrawal at sea to verify compliance. Korean War era, U.S. soldiers wear price tags to show taxpayers the cost of a rifleman's kit. Helmet $4.05, wool jacket $23.15, combat boots $10.55, an itemized invoice in human form. Monica Bellucci in a playful Max magazine shoot, September 1992. The same year she appeared in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Italy's emerging star posed amid paparazzi theatrics and 90s pop culture spectacle. December 5, 1933. Passengers toast aboard the luxury liner SS Manhattan off New York as Prohibition ends. Before repeal, liners ran wet cruises beyond the 12-mile limit, legal drinks at sea, dry shores at home. England, October 1942. An Avro Lancaster crew waits for the scramble. At their feet sit bright yellow boxes, RAF carrier pigeons, a fail-safe if radios died or the bomber ditched. War flew with backup birds. USA, 1933. Crowds besiege a Fox theater for King Kong. The Depression-era blockbuster triggered near riots and sold-out shows nationwide. Budapest, Feb 14, 1945. Soviet sappers deployed trained dogs to sweep a mined rail line. The animals were conditioned to signal explosive scent, opening routes through a frozen, booby-trapped city. 1944. RAF armorers load a 4,000 lb cookie blockbuster into a de Havilland Mosquito, chalked, "Happy Christmas, Adolf." The wooden twin-engine Mosquito was fast enough to haul this single giant bomb on precision raids against Gestapo HQs and industrial targets. Seattle, 1973. An electric AMC Gremlin sips power from a curbside Electropark outlet, 25C per hour. A proto-EV charging trial born of the energy crisis, decades before mainstream chargers dotted city streets. Ardennes, winter 1944-45. U.S. infantrymen haul a deer and 2 hares. Field rations, not trophies. During the Battle of the Bulge, shortages pushed units to forage game to stretch K rations. 1896. Fridtjof Nansen stands on skis after abandoning his ship to walk toward the North Pole. He and Hjalmar Johansson reached 86°14 N, a world record, then survived a year on Franz Josef Land before rescue. Ice, seals, and nerve kept them alive. November 14, 1910. Eugene Ely launches a Curtiss pusher off the improvised deck of USS Birmingham, the first airplane ever to take off from a warship. Wheels kiss the water on liftoff. 2 months later, he nails the first tailhook landing. Carrier aviation begins. U.S. GIs pose with a captured Mercedes-Benz billed as Hitler's personal car on a Victory Bond tour, late 1940s. These trophy road shows packed theaters and sold war bonds, though several different Hitler cars toured and authenticity was often disputed. Paris, May Day 1919. Workers march with wooden gags clenched, mocking wartime censorship. The first post-armistice rally demands the 8-hour day and civil rights. USA, 1942. Impounded cars fill a racetrack after Executive Order 9066 forced 120,000 Japanese Americans from their homes. Families were herded to assembly centers. Property, like these vehicles, was seized, sold off, or left to rot. Aberfan, Wales. 21 cars, chalked 1966. A rain-soaked coal tip liquefied and thundered into Pantglass Junior School, killing 144 people. 116 were children. The inquiry blamed the National Coal Board's negligence and reshaped UK mine waste safety law. 1960s Britain. Ascot sold a kitchen sink that hid a full bathtub. Flip the lid, climb in. One gas heater fed both fixtures, a space-saving hack for cramped flats before modern plumbing spread. Vienna, 1949. A casting call for Hitler doubles in the U.S. occupation zone. Studios needed stand-ins for newsreels and satire, so lookalikes queued under hot lamps. History recast, mustache by mustache. Portugal, 1910. A Lusitanian chasseur's lieutenant dangles from a beam scale, clutching saddle and tack. The weigh-in quantified a cavalry horse's total burden, rider plus gear, before maneuvers. Beijing, 1958. Summer Palace. Citizens bang gongs and wave rags to keep sparrows aloft until they drop from exhaustion. The Four Pests campaign erased birds, unleashed locusts, and helped tip China toward famine. History's loudest ecological own goal. Italy, 1945. U.S. infantrymen dump wallets, letters, and photos into a crate. Pre-raid rules ban any ID beyond dog tags. Faces blackened and kits stripped for silence, they move out to hit German lines at night. Olshany, Kharkiv region, 1933. An armed Komsomol guards a granary marked Seed and Reserve Fund. Such enforcement accompanied Soviet grain procurements during the famine, Holodomor, that devastated Ukraine. 1940. Albert Einstein receives U.S. citizenship from Judge Philip Foreman. He fled Nazi Germany in 1933 and renounced it, though he co-signed the 1939 letter to Roosevelt. He wasn't on the Manhattan Project. Constantinople, 1909. Harem attendants of Sultan Abdulhamid II stand with 2 eunuchs, robes patterned like signal flags. Weeks later, the Young Turk Revolution toppled the Sultan, court ritual to collapse in a season. 1931, Universal parked an ambulance and stationed nurses outside theaters showing Frankenstein, a publicity stunt to bait headlines about fainting patrons. Horror sold itself with sirens, stretchers, and manufactured panic. 1938, cosmetic bracelet, a wrist-worn compact with 7 hidden compartments. Twist the outer band to reveal a mirror, lipstick, powder, rouge, and applicators. Pre-war wearable tech, glamour on the wrist. 1950s UK, infantry hitch a ride across a canal on a Centurion, improvised ferry, not a swimmer. The 50-ton tank's deck serves as a bridgehead when pontoons aren't on hand. 1932, Mr. and Mrs. Ed M. Canfield display coyotes shot from their airplane, early aerial predator control. Bounties and fur prices drove such flights across the American West. 1947, 20th Century Fox lot. Studio barbers beckoned 21-year-old Marilyn Monroe for hair tests. Freshly renamed and under contract, she was being engineered into the platinum blonde persona that launched her stardom. 1915, wartime combat divers, engineers in rubberized suits with life belts and surface-supplied air, prepare to slip into a river. Their jobs: cut obstacles, plant charges, and scout crossings under enemy fire, the proto-frogmen of World War I. 1978, Margaret Thatcher slips on a cuirass for a photo op, armor for Britain's soon-to-be PM. Her moniker Iron Lady wasn't British at all, coined in 1976 by Soviet paper Krasnaya Zvezda after her hardline speech. RAF Lancaster City Eraser Load, one 1,800 Kielgauer cookie plus 2,132 1.8 kilograms incendiaries in 12 canisters. The blast ripped roofs open, the magnesium sticks then ignited the exposed city, tactics behind the Hamburg-Dresden firestorms. Afghanistan, 1969. A vakil, street lawyer, runs his office from a bazaar bench, drafting petitions and contracts amid butchers' hides. Legal advice for a few Afghanis, faster than court. Most disputes still went to the local jirga. Hangzhou, 1920s. A barrel playpen keeps a toddler immobile in the street. Cheap childcare and a crash stop against traffic in Wells. Common in eastern China in the early 20th century. Weighted tubs, arms free, legs trapped, escape impossible. Moscow, 1st June 1923. Children march for Lickbez, the USSR's mass drive to annihilate illiteracy, decreed 1919. Night schools, factory classes, and agate trains turned letters into a state project. By the late 1930s, literacy surpassed 80% across the USSR. 1944, Mittelwerk tunnels near Nordhausen. Dora Mittelbau prisoners assemble V-2 tail fins under coercion. Germany's secret missile line ran on lethal labor. Over 20,000 died from starvation, disease, and abuse. Space-age ambition built in an underground graveyard. 1920s U.S. airmail pilots followed giant concrete arrows, 50-70 ft long, across the continent. Rotating beacons once lit each waypoint. The towers are gone, but the arrows still point through the desert. Mid-20th century Britain. Blue tits learned to pierce foil milk caps and skim the cream. The skills spread rapidly via social learning, forcing milkmen and homeowners to add protective lids. Feb. 1945, near Linnich, Germany. 1st Lieutenant Roy Buck Rogers of the 102nd Infantry Division exposes a German soldier who buried himself in a foxhole to avoid capture. The war's last winter turned fields into traps and hiding places. 7 Deck, 1941. SINCPAC radioed all ships near Hawaii. Air raid on Pearl Harbor X. This is no drill. Minutes after bombs began falling, the Pacific War for the U.S. had begun. Bryansk, 1943. A German poster declares, "The German Army, your protector and friend." Behind it, the street lies in ruins. Occupation and combat expose the lie. Propaganda fluttering over rubble. Nov, 1998. The Rockefeller Center Christmas tree was flown by Antonov An-124 from Richfield, Ohio, to New York City. A holiday icon rolled up the cargo ramp of a Cold War-era heavy lifter. USSR 1968, a bicycle driver's license, photo ID with stamps and printed rules. Street riding often required a permit, minimum age 14, 16 with an auxiliary motor. Pedaling came with paperwork. 1915, Western Front. German POWs on burial detail excavate rows of graves for French casualties. This POW labor, permitted under the 1907 Hague Conventions, was routinely used after major offensives to clear battlefields. 1938, downtown Pittsburgh, Liberty Ave at 5th, 10:35 a.m. Looks like night. Coal-fired furnaces and refuse burning filled the air with soot and sulfur haze. Streetlights often stayed on at noon. Fresh laundry turned gray within hours. Germany 1938. On Joseph Goebbels' birthday, officials handed out Volksempfänger radios. The low-cost sets were tuned for local state stations only. Living rooms turned into propaganda loudspeakers. 1967. The 95-ton Transphibian Tactical Crusher, Litro Crusher, built in 2 prototypes, was designed to cut corridors for U.S. forces in Vietnam. An armored cab, a huge tree-felling beam, and 3 3.7-inch hollow steel drums with cutting rims crushed timber while also providing flotation. 20 Nov 1944, Ulithi Atoll, the oiler USS Mississinewa, AO-59, was hit by a Japanese Kite-man torpedo. Her fuel ignited and she capsized and sank, the first successful Kite strike on a U.S. ship. Germany 1923, $1 bought 420 marks in Jan 1922, 7,400 in Deke, then 4.2 trillion by Nov 1923. Banknotes turned into wallpaper and stove fuel overnight. Britain 1940, police tested illuminated helmets, battery-powered lamps shining through white cork. Built for blackout patrols during the Blitz, they were heavy and short-lived, and most forces dropped the idea. Lubbock, Texas, 1942. A wartime scrap drive stages a Hitler effigy under a noose between signs reading, "Help hang Hitler" and "Scrap will do it." U.S. towns used spectacles like this to pull in tons of metal for ships, tanks, and guns. Propaganda plus salvage equaled production. 19 Aug 1960. Academician Oleg Gazenko presents Belka and Strelka, the first animals to orbit Earth and return alive. They flew on Sputnik 5, circling the planet 17 times. Strelka's puppy later lived in the Kennedy White House. 1944, Alsace. A French resistance fighter surveys confiscated shoes from Jewish prisoners at Natzweiler Struthof, the only Nazi concentration camp on French soil. The SS evacuated the site that year as Allies advanced, leaving these remnants behind. Nov 1907. Count Henry de La Vole in a quilted crash suit during Victor Tatten's monoplane tests. In 1900, he set a balloon distance record, about 1/200 miles from Vincennes to Korostyshiv, near Kiev, in 35.34 hours. 1979, Sino-Vietnamese War. A Vietnamese militia woman escorts a column of captured Chinese soldiers. The 29-day border war produced heavy casualties and thousands of POWs before China withdrew. Oct 1942, Stalingrad. 4 Soviet POWs move through a shattered factory as 2 German soldiers rest amid broken concrete. The factory district, Red October, Barricade, Tractor, was fought room by room before the winter encirclement. Ploiești, Romania, 1940. A forest of wooden derricks pulls crude from the ground. These fields were the Axis fuel lifeline for the Wehrmacht. 3 years later, Allied bombers targeted them in Operation Tidal Wave, 1943. July 1943, Oral Kursk sector. Soviet tankers extract a badly wounded crewmate from a U.S.-made M3 Lee supplied under Lend-Lease. The side-mounted 75mm Sponson gun identifies the vehicle. Such rescues were attempted even under fire during the Kursk battles. 1929, Beirut. Armenian orphans from Kayseri line up at a relief orphanage. They are survivors, or children of survivors, of the 1915-17 deportations and mass killings in the Ottoman Empire. Budapest, November 1944. German Army demolition charges on Margaret Bridge detonated prematurely. The bridge collapsed under active traffic. Trams and cars fell into the Danube. Hundreds of civilians and approximately 40 German soldiers were killed. 7th of July, 1959, NASA Langley. Cast body molds for astronaut couches line a hangar. Each custom shell captured a test subject's posture to shape contoured seats for high-G launch and re-entry. 1943-44, near Leningrad. Soviet combat cameramen film from a frontline trench in winter. Hand-cranked movie cameras sit beside a Maxim machine gun as they record the siege under fire. Washington, D.C., October 1922. A Fordson exposition shows Model F tractors driving a silo blower via belt power. Introduced in 1917, the Fordson became the world's best-selling tractor, over 500,000, built by 1928, bringing gasoline power to small farms. Paris, 25 August 1917. Crowds watch a staffer update Excelsior's giant street map of the Western Front. Newspapers posted daily frontline changes in public to track the First World War's progress. United States, late 1960s, American neo-Nazis stage a pro-Vietnam War rally with swastika banners. Fringe extremists tried to hijack support the troops messaging amid the era's polarized protests. Nizhny Tagil, 1944, a T-34 tank converted to attract tractor hauls firewood. Wartime Ural factories repurposed damaged or unarmed hulls for local logistics and heating amid fuel and transport shortages. Iwo Jima, 1945, aerial view of the 3rd and 4th Marine Division's battlefield cemetery. The 36-day battle cost about 6,800 American lives. Most buried here were later reinterred. Manila, August 1945. U.S. Colonel Sidney Mashbeer refuses a handshake from Japanese Lieutenant General Torashiro Kawabe during surrender arrangements. The scene captured Allied terms, formal capitulation without courtesies. Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, 8-9 January 1944. The U.S. Army turned the field into a Pacific atoll for a war bond show. Troops staged a mock amphibious assault with pyrotechnics and vehicles to sell bonds and demonstrate tactics. Homefront spectacle for a distant war. 30 November 1969, Portsmouth. Royal Navy divers leap from HMS Hermes after 14-year-old Welsh diving champion Janet Abercrombie during a display. A Cold War carrier briefly doubled as a high board. Early June 1945, Berlin. Soviet soldiers inspect piles of handcuffs in a Gestapo prison wing. The security service had collapsed with the city, its cells and restraints left behind as evidence. Khorramshahr, 1982. An Iranian teenager escorts captured Iraqi soldiers during the Iran-Iraq War. The city had just been retaken in Operation Beit ol-Muqaddas, yielding thousands of Iraqi prisoners. Glastonbury, Connecticut, 1949, the first U.S. police radar speed trap. Connecticut State Police tested the device in 1947 and began issuing radar-based tickets in February 1949. London, Chelsea, 21st November 1969. TV host Pete Brady stands behind a triplex safety glass panel as 2 shooters fire to demonstrate its bullet resistance. The live test showcased commercial laminated glass stopping rifle rounds on camera. 1913, Balkan Wars. A Turkish prisoner performs ablution for his final prayer as Bulgarian soldiers erect a gallows. Summary executions were documented during the conflict. 1945-46, post-war Germany. Trümmerfrauen clear a bombed-out street under supervision, sweeping debris off the cobbles. With many men dead or in POW camps, women rebuilt cities brick by brick, salvaging, sorting, and reopening roads. 1917, Popular Mechanics proposed an aircraft sky projector, casting the Virgin Mary onto clouds to boost troop morale. A powerful lamp and stencil would paint holy icons on night clouds, propaganda fused with faith, more concept than reality. Bikini Atoll, 1946, ex-Japanese battleship Nagato after Operation Crossroads atomic tests, her hull stenciled with survey numbers. She survived the airburst Able, but flooded and capsized 5 days after the underwater Baker detonation. USSR, 1925, Boris Grabovsky with the transmitting tube of his Telefot, an early fully electronic television system. In 1928, he demonstrated live image transmission in Tashkent, but the design saw no adoption and broadcasting moved in other directions. 27 June 1967, Enfield, London. Barclays installed the world's first ATM, Barclaycash, conceived by John Shepard Barron. Customers used single-use, voucher-like tokens to withdraw $10. Actor Reg Varney made the first withdrawal. 1989, East Berlin, GDR. A Soviet security officer on assignment stands among onlookers. Weeks later, the Berlin Wall fell and the GDR unraveled. 1989, Tim Burton stands on the Anton first designed Batmobile from Batman. The screen car, built on a Chevrolet chassis with a working flame effect, fronted the blockbuster that won an Oscar for production design and triggered Batmania. Smolensk Oblast, 1942. German troopsman, a sandbag security train, rifles and MG-34s covering both flanks against partisan attack. Rail lines were lifelines for Army Group Center, prompting armed convoys and armored wagons. Russia, 1900. A Cossack soldier restrained with manacles on wrists and ankles as disciplinary punishment. Imperial Russian Army regulations permitted temporary confinement and irons for offenses such as insubordination or drunkenness. Japanese Type 99 Kai-3 Model 3 phosphorus air defense bomb detonates above a U.S. B-24 Liberator. Dropped from Imperial Navy interceptors, the Mar-30 Kylyu canisters burst to scatter incendiary mix and steel fragments through bomber formations. Berlin, 10 May 1945. A Red Army signalwoman directs traffic amid ruins, the shattered Reichstag behind her. 2 days after Germany's capitulation, Soviet military police used flags and whistles to control key intersections. Early 1943. Hitler inspects the Stuka Kievs, 184. Ferdinand Porsche stands beside him. 65 were built with the 88 mm Pak 43-2, debuted at Kursk, lethal at range, mauled by mines and infantry, later rebuilt as Elephant. Winter 1942-43. Luftwaffe cylindrical drop containers packed with rations, ammunition, and medical supplies for the encircled 6th Army at Stalingrad. The airlift required roughly 300-500 tons per day, but averaged about 80-100. Many canisters missed the drop zones or fell to Soviet troops. France, 1945. German POWs confined in open corrugated iron punishment cells at an Allied camp. Numbered pits kept prisoners exposed and isolated under guard, discipline without walls. Napoleon's campaign portable library was a leather case disguised as a single folio, packed with dozens of miniature volumes. Titles covered classics, history, geography, science, and plays for reading on campaign. The compact set traveled with him in coaches and tents across Europe. May 1940, Los Angeles. Police smash confiscated pinball machines after California classified the game as an illegal gambling device. Raids destroyed thousands of cabinets and seized cash. Many U.S. cities kept bans for decades. New York City did not legalize pinball until 1976. Los Angeles, 1910, Dominguez Field Air Meet, America's first major air show, drew roughly 250,000 spectators. Biplanes, dirigibles, and parachutists flew together. Louis Paulhan set U.S. altitude and endurance marks, while Glenn Curtiss won speed events. Early aviation turned into a mass spectacle. 1951, West Virginia. Clay Battelle FFA students learn ham curing, salt sugar rubs with nitrate, then cold smoking. Post-war vocational agriculture classes taught farm preservation skills alongside shop and livestock. 1940, Przemysł. Soviet oil tank cars are handed over to German border officials. Under the 1939-41 German-Soviet trade pacts, the USSR shipped oil, grain, and other raw materials and allowed rubber transit, helping the Reich build stocks for the Western Campaign and the 1941 invasion. 1923, United States. An early hands-free telephone harness for switchboard operators by American Bell Telephone. A chest and head rig holds the mouthpiece in front of the face with a single earpiece on the head, an ancestor of modern headsets from the company that became AT&T. On the set of the 1975 comedy Love and Death, a dummy soldier has just been fired from a cannon and streaks across the sky. Crew in winter gear watch the projectile arc over the open field. October 1943, Zaporizhzhia. Retreating German forces demolished the Dnipro-HES dam and powerhouse, already crippled by a Soviet demolition in August 1941. The breach drained the reservoir, wrecked turbines, and blacked out much of southeastern Ukraine. Pittsburgh, April 17, 1909. John Wilson Webb photographed with his mother. At age 2 years, 10 months, he reportedly weighed 120 bar, 54.5 k. The images circulated in newspapers and medical notes as an early documented case of extreme pediatric weight gain. London Olympics, 1908. Dorando Pietri staggered into White City Stadium first, collapsed 5 times, and was helped across the line. Immediate disqualification. Gold went to Johnny Hayes, USA. Queen Alexandra awarded Pietri a special gilded cup. This race fixed the marathon at 26 miles, 385 yards. London, 1940. The Blitz. A Luftwaffe night raid gutted this street. The campaign struck 57 consecutive nights, killed 143,000 civilians, and damaged over 1 million homes. Berlin, 21 Aug. 1948. Potsdamer Platz. Workers paint the borderline separating the Soviet and British sectors. It's the Berlin blockade era when a stripe of paint marked a fault line of the Cold War. 13 years later, this frontier hardened into the Berlin Wall. Moscow, 31st Jan. 1990, the USSR's first McDonald's. Queues stretched for hours at Pushkin Square. About 30,000 customers were served on opening day. Bluffton, South Carolina, Feb. 1913. Rosie, age 7, shucks oysters. She had already worked 3 years. Photographed by Louis Hine for the National Child Labor Committee, scenes like this helped drive U.S. child labor reforms. Buenos Aires, 1938. Luna Park hosted what is widely reported as the largest Nazi rally outside Germany. Thousands assembled under banners and salutes, a stark historical record of Axis reach in South America. 1943, Type Secrecy C U-boat, U-427 rockets to the surface in an emergency blow, a porpoise jump seen through periscope crosshairs. The maneuver used high-pressure air to breach fast and evade depth charges. U-427 later surrendered and was sunk in Operation Deadlight, 1946. USA, 1957, Bulgarian-American aviator Asen. Jordanov demonstrates an inflatable crash cushion for airline passengers. This full-body airbag concept predated mass-market automotive airbags by more than a decade. South Vietnam, Deck 8, 1967. A U.S. Navy lieutenant fires a flaming arrow at a thatched hut believed to conceal a Viet Cong bunker. Riverine units sometimes used fire-tipped arrows to silently ignite roof thatch during Mekong Delta searches. Cassius Clay, soon Muhammad Ali, poses atop $1,000 in a bank vault, 1963. A 21-year-old contender turned the stunt into headline fuel just months before seizing the heavyweight crown. Pearl Harbor, 19 Mar 1943, USS Oklahoma, BB-37, being righted 90 degrees by parbuckling cables and 21 shore winches. Capsized on 7 deck 1941 with 429 dead, she was refloated and decommissioned. The Hulk sank under tow in 1947. Aalst, Netherlands. 18 Sept 1944. Local girls hand apples to a U.S. Sherman crew during Operation Market Garden. Liberation rolled through Dutch towns as armor rattled past shattered shopfronts. Chocolate still on the sign. South Africa, 1902. Harry Mary, an improvised armored train of the Second Boer War. Ships' hawsers were draped over the locomotive as makeshift armor to blunt bullets and shrapnel when steel plating wasn't available. London, 1901. The electrophone let subscribers hear live theater and church services over a telephone line. Using a stethoscope-style headset and operator connection, this pre-radio streaming ran from the 1890s until 1925. 1943. B-17 Flying Fortresses strike Bremen through solid overcast using H-2X Mickey radar. The 8th Air Force used this blind bombing to hit U-boat yards and Focke-Wulf plants when visual attacks were impossible. Oak Ridge, 1954. Lipstick applied by a remote master-slave manipulator to demonstrate sub-millimeter control. Gortz's teleoperator arms, born from Manhattan Project radiological work, let technicians handle hot samples from behind heavy shielding. USSR, 1944. Soviet airmen examine a small photograph before a sortie. Behind them is a Petlyakov PE-2 dive bomber. Over 11,000 PE-2s fought on the Eastern Front, flying steep dive attacks, level bombing, and reconnaissance. Atlanta, 1864. Sherman's men tear up Confederate rails, then heat and twist them into Sherman's neckties to collapse supply lines. The wrecking helped force Atlanta's fall and set up the march to the sea. Kiel, 1940. The Scharnhorst-class Gneisenau shows a torn bow after a torpedo from HMS Clyde off Norway, 20 June 1940. The hit flooded forward compartments and forced months of repairs, including fitting an extended Atlantic bow. Moscow, 1978. A penal colony choir rehearses. Shaved heads, sheet music, chalked staves on the board. In the USSR, music programs in correctional colonies doubled as discipline and display. The stage here had bars instead of curtains. Seoul, late Sept 1950. U.S. Marines fight block to block under the cover of tanks after the Incheon landings. The capital was recaptured on 28 September, ending a week of urban combat that cost thousands of casualties on both sides. Amsterdam, 1935. Anne Frank, age 6, with her friend Sanne Lederman on Mervedeplein. 7 years later, Anne entered hiding and began her diary. Sanne was killed in the Holocaust in 1943. Arizona, SEAB 1900. Men crowd a saloon faro table, the West's most played gambling game. Faro used a single 52-card deck with near even money bets, but house edges and frequent cheating with rigged dealing boxes and the soda last card rule cleaned players out fast. France, 1941. German occupation troops inspect civilian identity papers. Everyone 15 plus had to carry an Ausweis at all times. Random checks enforced curfews and movement controls. Failure could mean arrest or deportation. England, 1944. Royal Navy X-class midget submarine on sea trials. These 50-ft boats hauled 2 side charges and famously crippled the battleship Tirpitz in 1943. Later, XE variants cut cables and attacked ships in the Far East. Hollywood, 1930. Charlie Chaplin mock spars with Italian giant Primo Carnera. Carnera, 6'5", and Baumann $260 lb became world heavyweight champion in 1933. Chaplin stood about 5'5", a 100-plus pound mismatch. Times Square, 1930. Unemployed men parade with placards. Will work for $1 a week. In the first year of the Great Depression, U.S. joblessness neared 9%, hitting past 25% by 1933, and some offered token wages just to secure food and a bed. 1930s, urban baby cages were wire balconies bolted outside apartment windows to give infants doctor-prescribed fresh air and sun. Popular with London mothers' clubs and even sold via mail order after a 1922 U.S. patent, they faded as safety concerns and building rules tightened. Italy, 23 March 1944, Mount Vesuvius erupted and smothered Pompeii airfield in ash and fire. The blast destroyed or crippled 88 USAF B-25 Mitchells of the 340th Bomb Group, the war's largest one-day loss of bombers without enemy action. Moscow, 1950s, a zigzag queue on Red Square to Lenin's mausoleum. Lenin's embalmed body has been on public display since 1924. By mid-century, millions filed past after hours in sub-zero cold. Bilbao, Biscay, 1930s. Women at the Castaños Municipal Laundry work over stone basins with piped water. Before home plumbing and washers were common, public washhouses like this served thousands daily and doubled as neighborhood hubs. New York City, mid-1920s, an early Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade rolls up Broadway with horse-drawn floats. The parade began in 1924. Its famous giant helium balloons arrived in 1927, designed by Tony Sarg and built by Goodyear. Germany, 12 Nov 1933, Reichstag election and referendum under Nazi rule. With all opposition parties banned and a single NSDAP list, officials reported 92% support on almost 96% turnout. It consolidated one-party control weeks after quitting the League of Nations. Lake Ladoga, 22 Nov 1941. The first truck convoys drove the Road of Life, a supply route across new ice to besieged Leningrad. Over 2 winters, it hauled food and fuel in and evacuated roughly 1,000 civilians under shelling and air raids. Bibi Haybat oil fields, Baku, 1915, the Caspian's Derek Forest, feeding the empire's war fuel. This basin hosted one of the world's first drilled wells, 1846, and by 1901 produced roughly half of global oil. St. Louis, early 1930s, armored payroll truck with portholes and a rotating cupola, guarded by men carrying Thompson submachine guns. Built for the public enemy era when Midwestern cash moves drew gunfire before FDIC reforms and the 1934 firearms crackdown. San Francisco, April 1906, Market Street after the M7.8 earthquake and fires that burned for 3 days. About 3,000 people died and roughly 80% of the city, over 28,000 buildings, was destroyed. Romania, 1915, a wheeled steel trench shield built in the CFR, state railways, workshops for the Great War. This improvised mantlet let a rifleman crawl or roll forward under plate protection when factory armor was scarce. Los Angeles, 1941, Norma Jean Baker, later Marilyn Monroe, about age 15, visiting a local zoo. 3 years later, she'd be discovered at the radioplane factory, sign a modeling contract, and begin the transformation into Marilyn Monroe. Virginia, 1967. The couple at the center of Loving v. Virginia sit with their children after the Supreme Court's 9-0 ruling. The decision struck down interracial marriage bans nationwide, voiding laws in 16 states. A private family changed U.S. civil rights. San Francisco, June 26, 1945. Harold E. Stassen signs the United Nations Charter for the United States. At 37, the former Minnesota governor was the youngest U.S. delegate. The Charter's 111 articles established the General Assembly, Security Council, and a new system of collective security. 1943, an evacuated Polish boy carries loaves baked from Red Cross flour at a refugee camp. World War II uprooted tens of millions. Relief agencies kept families alive with flour, milk powder, and field bakeries. Harlem, 1960. Fidel Castro, 34, signs autographs and smokes a cigar at the Hotel Teresa after shifting his UN delegation to Harlem when Midtown hotels balked. During this visit, he met Malcolm X and Nikita Khrushchev, making Harlem the headline stop of the trip. Jordan, 1969. Rows of tents in a Palestinian refugee camp formed after the 1948 and 1967 wars. By the late 1960s, Jordan sheltered hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in UNRWA-run camps, many still living under canvas and winter mud. See 1917. A young conscript says goodbye to his grandmother before shipping out to World War I. The war mobilized 70+ million troops and killed some 10 million soldiers, a scene like this repeated on platforms across Europe and America. Tasmania, 7 Feb 1967, Black Tuesday. Bushfires erased whole suburbs in minutes. 62 people died, 1,900 were injured, and 1,300 homes burned, leaving over 7,000 homeless. France, 1890. Clément Ader's steam-powered Éole, a bat-winged monoplane, lifted off under its own power for an uncontrolled hop of 150 meters. It lacked flight controls and quickly settled, but the attempt came 13 years before the Wrights and drove Ader's later avian experiments. Nice, 16th May 1912. The Titanic orphans, Michel and Edmund Navratil, reunited with their mother Marcel. Their father had abducted them under an alias, placed them in a lifeboat as Titanic sank, and died. The boys were rescued by Carpathia and identified via newspaper photos. Tibet, 1956. Monks with a Czechoslovak Jawa 250 two-stroke, an export workhorse that penetrated even Himalayan markets. The 250-353 made roughly 1214 HP, ran about 100 km, and later inspired licensed Indian offshoots like the Yezdi. San Diego, 1947. Women Marines in uniform share beers off duty as the Corps demobilizes from Dobro Sharumbai. The wartime Women's Reserve peaked at $19,000. Post-war, women remained a small but permanent part of the USMC. USA, 1943. Wartime meat rationing. OPA Red Point coupons and price ceilings squeezed ground beef, so diners posted "No Hamburger Tuesday" and pushed substitutes like hot dogs and offal. 1965-66. Angus Barbieri fasted 382 days under hospital supervision, drinking tea, coffee, soda water, and taking yeast, vitamins, and potassium-sodium supplements. He fell from 456 gelb to $180 lb, 276 lb. Doctors recorded bowel movements roughly every 37-48 days.